Welcome to Is This a Great Game or What? And our esteemed guest today is Jim Palmer, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, and by far the greatest Oriole pitcher of all time. Cakes, say hi to Jeff Kirkchin again.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
We're getting to the point of the podcast where we have repeat guests, so it's no longer meet my son, Jeff.
Right.
Now, Cakes, I don't want to embarrass you or my dad. Well, it's my job to embarrass my dad, but how can you be 10 years older than my dad and look so much better than he does?
It's true.
Did you have to face Frank Howard and Carmen Killebrew and Oliva? No, I don't. But, I tell people, they go, geez, you really look young for 80. And I said, well, just think if I hadn't gotten a lot of guys out, how old I would. So, it's funny because when I got out of high school, I thought I'd go to UCLA and play basketball, or SC wanted, the Dodgers wanted me to, because I was a year before the draft. They wanted me to go to SC for a year. They signed Jeff Torborg, and then they, so on and so on. And they were going to. I said, "Can you put that in writing?" They said no. So I went up to a college league, and I was the only high school player in the league. Played with Jim Lomborg, played with Bobby Floyd. Merv Breton was on that team. So and when I came back, Houston offered more money. Paul Richards had run the Orioles, so I had a bunch of options who to sign with, and my parents said, we really like Jim Wilson, and then Jim Russo was a scout that actually would come to South Dakota where I played in this college league, and Pierre was the closest airport. Every time somebody needed to pick him up, it would be me. Every time somebody take him back to the airport, it would be me. Now, again, Jim Lomborg, 4 years later, would win a Cy Young Award. So anyway, he got to know me, and apparently they felt comfortable enough to give me $40,000, which was really, it was a lot of money, but it wasn't a lot of money compared to what they were doing a couple of years earlier with Bob Bailey. And, you just go down the list. Guys were getting, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's how I played with the Orioles. So just imagine I would look like your dad if I hadn't picked the right organization. Long story, but get to the point.
Right. Well,
but again, I played with some great players, and when you're 19, you get to room with Robin Roberts, who had like 270 wins at the time, and he was willing to mentor you, even though he knew that somebody, not me, but somebody was going to take his job because he was the starting pitcher with the Orioles. And my first year when I was 19, I spent it in the bullpen.
Right. Cakes. Robin Roberts made his major league debut in 1948, and he was your roommate in 1965. You were also teammates in 65 with Harvey Haddix and Don Larson. What was it like for a 19-year-old to be around that level of pitching, in this case, famous pitching?
Well, not only that, we had Stu Miller, one of the great relievers of all time, the best changeup pitcher of all time. Trevor Hoffman obviously is in the Hall of Fame. Stu isn't, but you could load the bases up. And Stu, Jerry Adair was our second baseman. He dislocated his shoulder swinging one of his changeups in spring training.
Really?
That's how deceptive it was. So you load the bases up, and it's hard to hit the ball out of the infield off with Stu. So as good as Mariano was, Trevor Hoffman and all that, it was just amazing. So we had Sherm Waller, who had been a great catcher. He was our bullpen catcher. We had Eddie Fisher, eventually a knuckleballer. I recall the Swarthmore, walked 9 guys in his career, I think. Kind of now we're talking about dynamics and analytics, how you kind of 6'6", threw the ball uphill, was a great athlete because he came up with the Pirates as a third baseman and eventually became a relief pitcher. So we had a multitude of guys. And then had John Orsino, who was one of our backup catchers. He chose baseball over being a drummer for Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons. Big mistake. And then Charlie Lau, Dick Brown was our regular catcher. Charlie Lau was, he had an elbow problem, as did John Orsino. So those were our backup catchers. So I would sit in the bullpen with John Orsino, and played on the Giants. I think he part of a team that hit 5 straight home runs or something. Then you had Charlie Lau, went on to be one of the great hitting instructors, and he called me brash because I asked so many questions. Just sit out there and not, you obviously sitting there, you could absorb a lot of stuff, but I just kind of wondered what it was like to be Harvey Haddix, to pitch, 12 no-hit innings, perfect innings, and then Joe Adcock hit a home run off him. I wanted to know what it was like. I used to stand up at home plate when Stu Miller would warm up. He's throwing changeups, so you're just kind of doing this and whatever. And then he threw me a fastball, I almost had a heart attack. So I saw the difference between changing speeds and things like that. And and then I played for Cal Ripken Sr. my first year in Aberdeen. We had pretty good team. We were 86-37. We had Eddie Watt, who was 14-1. We had Davey Leonard, who was 16-4. We had Tom Fisher, who was 6. We had Mike Davidson, who was 11-4, and I was 11-3. So we used to run every day as a team. Now I got to Baltimore. Milt Pappas didn't run; he just won games. Steve Barber, first 20-game winner, he didn't run a lot. So I picked Dick Hall because, like I said, he was a former third baseman. He was an athlete. He was smart. Went to Swarthmore. We'd go down. He'd drive me to the ballpark my second year after I bought a house and be talking about geological formations on Charles Street. When we went down there, and he told me about all kinds of stuff that I didn't really know about. So when you're 19 years old, you want to, everybody said, well, you just have to, be seen and not heard. I just felt, okay, I needed to ask some questions that I felt I needed answers to. And I had this wonderful group of guys that were willing to do that. Robin would say about 1 o'clock, he'd say, kid, I got to get some sleep. I'm 38, you're 19. I got to get some rest, because he was trying to win 300 games. So it was a wonderful environment to be in. And we were also a good team. We didn't win that year. The Twins won 102 games. We won 94 games. In fact, we traded for Frank Robinson, who won a Triple Crown, hit 49 home runs, 2 in the World Series. We did win the World Series the next year against the Dodgers. We only won 3 more games with that team. So we were a good organization. You had Brooks Robinson and Boog Powell. We didn't have Paul Blair would come up maybe the end of the year. Aparicio, Hall of Famer, was a shortstop. Yeah, nice group of guys.
Cakes, all these guys that you played with, what is the difference today, say, for Connor Griffin of the Pirates being 19 coming up compared to when you were 19 in 1965? Is it way harder today? Is it way easier today? How do you look at that?
Well, you probably have to ask Connor. Because, I don't know what, I assume if he was the number 1 prospect in baseball, because we had guys like that in Baltimore. You had Adley Rutschman, then you have Jackson Holliday, who has the Hammett bone. I guess he'll be back pretty soon, injury, number 1 guys, So we didn't have social media back then, nobody knew. You'd have to pick up the paper to see if Jerry Lucas or Oscar Robinson was leading the country in NCAA basketball points or whatever, or the NBA, how many points a game was Wilt taking. So you didn't have your iPhone or your iPad or whatever. So there's less scrutiny. When I went to Thomasville, Georgia, my first spring, nobody knew. I considered, I guess, a bonus kid, but somebody said, how much do you sign for? And I said, well, I got $30,000. My parents got $10,000. He said, no, you didn't. And I said, well, I was 18 years old. I'm having an argument that I got money because nobody knew. Now, if you're Adley Rutschman, and you're okay, or the Orioles going to take him, or you're going to take the 5-tool guy, Bobby Witt, who was second, or whatever. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows how much money they got. Everybody knows how he's doing in the minor leagues. You didn't have Baseball America back there. We had Sporting News, I think, but I don't think Baseball America was around. So, there was less notoriety. You could kind of sneak through. Do you think we traded for Adam Jones, and Chris Tillman came in that trade. He was the Mariners, and he was a terrific pitcher for us. Won like 20-some games without giving up 3 or less runs at Camden Yards. That's not easy to do when the fences were normal. Now they moved him back a little bit, but he was minor league pitcher of the year at 7-11 for the Mariners. Nobody knew that Eddie Watt was 14-1, and he went to Elmira and pitched a no-hitter. And then he went back the next year, and in the first 2 weeks pitched another no-hitter. Right over the top. Fastball, curveball. Next year he's throwing sidearm in the big leagues. Now, nobody knew that. it was Eddie Watt. Davey Leonard was my roommate, went to Hopkins, signed for a 10% discount on a pair of spikes. That was the signing. They said, well, no, he went to Hopkins, George Washington. He was a cross-country runner, 160 pounds. He won 66-21 in the minor leagues. He won 20 games in Double-A, 15-3, 16-4 when I played with him in Aberdeen. Nobody knew that, he was on, what was that little book, Baseball Digest?
Yes.
And they did an article on him because he was a Hopkins guy.
Right.
Do you want to go try to explain to people in East Baltimore, South Baltimore, how they get pregnant, or do you want to go try to be a major league player? He said, I think I'd like to go play baseball, and and he had trouble making our teams, but nobody back now they would go, hey, don't you think somebody wants the guy that's 66-21 in the minor leagues? Back then nobody knew. I knew because, he was my roommate. So the game has changed. So there's a lot more notoriety. I actually watched his first game the other day because they were playing the Orioles. And, Kyle Bradish probably felt sorry for him because he threw him a hanging curveball and he doubled up the gap for an RBI and whatever. I'm being facetious when I say that. But bottom line is, I'm looking at the game and I go, I threw him 2 good sliders. He swings and misses because Bradish has one of the best breaking balls in baseball. And I'm going, okay, now what? How about a fastball up and in? He throws him a hanging curveball. But to his credit, he hit it. But they were comparing him to Cal Ripken and Cal Jr., who was a great athlete. But Cal Jr. didn't steal 65 bases in the minor league. He was a terrific basketball player, soccer player, and all that. So it looks like, he's got his size. Cal came up and played shortstop and so forth. But again, hopefully he'll have a great career because when I first met, Barry Bonds, I was doing ESPN in 1990, and walked up, I said, hi, Jim Palmer. I said, we both went to Arizona State. I said, hey, really good to see guys like you come into the big leagues, because that's what baseball needs. He said, I could hit you. And I smiled. I said, I'm sure you could because your dad wore my ass out. And he's a lot player than you. And Barry liked me, So you want an infusion of really talented players, and it looks like Connor Griffin's going to be that one. Plus, maybe who knows what's going to happen with the agreement between the owners and the players, and maybe Pittsburgh will actually have more money to spend or will spend more money. And they also got Ryan O'Hearn, one of my favorite guys, who's having a great year. He built the Orioles yesterday. So it looks like and. I'm surprised I didn't do that series because they loved me in Pittsburgh because we lost the 2 series in 1971 and 1979. When's that joke coming back to town? Yeah.
Right. Jim, you had mentioned, the athleticism of Cal Jr. And of course, we had a farm director on, John Baker, farm director for the Pirates, talked about Connor Griffin. And Connor Griffin had said, I think I'm a pretty good athlete, but I don't think I'm a great baseball player, and I'm here to learn, which I thought was like mind-blowing, great lesson for our kids, right? Like if you think you're a great baseball player at 19, you have another thing coming, right? So like awesome. But you yourself, incredible athlete. And with tonight on recording, we've got the national championship game. We've got the Masters starting this week. Obviously, baseball in full swing, NBA, NHL, just everything's going on. So for you, a Hall of Fame baseball player, what would you say is your second best sport?
Oh, well, probably, I don't know, basketball. And the reason I love basketball was because I had to work really hard at it. And I had a coach that taught me defense. Purportedly, I led the state in scoring my senior year. I don't know if I was, somebody said that. I don't know if I was first or second. It really doesn't matter. But I had a coach that, and you had to be in shape. I was just one of those kids. I met a guy the other day, and he said, I can kind of fit everything in. I was a pretty good student. Well, Craig Alberness, who's the new manager, he said, I knew when to study. I knew when to play sports. I knew when I needed to do things, so my mom would love me and be happy and all that. I think that was it. I go to basketball practice. We do all the conditioning and all that. I come home, help my mom. Wasn't a great cook. I'd help her do dinner, do the dishes, do my homework, and go out and run 2 miles. Now, I have no idea why I did that. other than the fact that if I had to guard, I was a forward. If I had to guard the best guard on the other team, I wanted to be quick enough and in shape enough to be able to do that. So basketball, when you throw as hard as I did, they didn't hit the ball very often. I mean, I sometimes didn't throw it over very often either, which is how I walked 130 and 129 innings in A-ball. But I had a 2.50 ERA, and they only hit 7 home runs, and I played on a really good team. And then I went to instructional league, and I thought I got better, and I think I walked maybe 62 and 54 innings down there. But I got to pitch. The Orioles let me pitch. I get to pitch 180 innings, and the next year you're in the big leagues. And to your point, you're trying to figure out what you need to do, number one, to get there. It kind of had to be there. Number two, how I get to stay there. And then you're around Robin Roberts, or you're watching Milt Pappas, who was a terrific pitcher, won over 200 games, or Steve Barber, who was a lefty, the first 20-game winner. You're going, what are they doing that I need to get better at? Even 66, when we beat the Dodgers, called up Tom Phoebus, who was from Baltimore. And Phoebe comes up, and he almost pitches 3 straight shutouts. Little guy, 5'9", made running look very difficult, but he had a really good fastball, a great overhand curveball, and what did he have that I didn't have? A slider. And we'd go to play Kansas City, and, when they signed Monday and Bando and Reggie Jackson and a lot of these guys, Tom would have success, and I'm going, these guys look like they hit the fastball, which I threw a lot better than the sliders. So I go, you know what? I won't throw a lot of them, but I'll start working on them. And then all of a sudden, that's what happens once you get to the big leagues, figure out how to stay there, and then look around and see who's really good. The same thing we had, Tim knows this as well. We had one of the great third baseman ever, 16 straight gold gloves, but Brooks Robinson was as nice a man as he was a third baseman. So you look around and you go, geez, who do I want to be like? Who do I want to emulate? Who's always nice to somebody? Who's always pleasant, and and like I learned a long time ago, the same amount of time it takes to be rude to somebody, you could actually be nice.
Cakes, you mentioned Dick Hall earlier. Yesterday, when we were taping, we used Dick Hall because D.L. Hall had thrown 2 wild pitches in a 2-inning relief appearance for the Brewers, and Dick Hall threw 1 wild pitch in 1,278 innings. We were talking about that yesterday. Dick Hall has been gone for a while, hadn't pitched in 40 years. What he threw 1 million strikes. Is that who Dick Hall was, your roommate?
Well, but he, it's funny. Warren Spahn won 363 games. He won 20 games 13 times after he turned 25.
Right.
I mean, and they said he could hit a gnat in the ass on the outside corner.
Right.
Well, Dick Hall could throw it in a thimble, and people don't even know what a thimble is. I was at a dinner party on Saturday night. I said, Howard Cosell. And she said, who? And she's like 34 years old. I go, I'll send you a video of who Howard Cosell was, because I worked with him for 9 years at ABC. Dick Hall, he had, again, like really good athlete, 6'6", threw the ball uphill. It kind of dropped arm angle, and they talk about guys now, they have really good, spin rate and whatever, that the ball is deceptive. That was Dick Hall. And he could throw the ball, contrary to what they do now in the big leagues. Now let's see, velocity and spin. And, of course, I say to people, I said, well, okay, how about having velocity and spin on the corner? Plate 17 inches wide, balls, 2.8 inches. You can add another almost 6 inches to the plate. Just throw the ball on the edge. Dick Hall threw the ball on the edge.
Right.
And again, he was extremely hard. I do broadcast, and I always call him 252-3426. That's his number. I won't give you the area code. Good, because he lived up the street. He was the godfather of my first daughter, and he had 3 girls and David, his son. So my daughter Jamie grew up playing with him. And Elena Hall was from Mazatlan, Mexico, terrific woman. And so, that's when you're living in Timonium, Maryland, you buy your first house after we won the World Series. I had to wait a week to be old enough to sign the papers because I was just turning 21. And he's, $26,200, and then you have this guy that's a little bit older who's going to kind of, again, mentor you and be there for your children and be there when you're on the road. His family was there at Easter. You really kind of have a love for people like that. So when I do a game and, you'd say, hey, he was out by a stride, and then Dick would call and he said, do you know how long a stride is? Like 3.5 feet. He's out by a stride. I said, went to Swarthmore. I said, whatever you said, because you're smarter than I am. And he was.
Cakes.
You know what deciduous haze is?
Huh?
That's what I'm saying. You know what deciduous haze is?
I don't think so.
That is a haze given by trees. So you know where I learned that? I was standing in the outfield one day, and it was a little bit hazy. And Dick says, well, deciduous haze. I said, okay, there you go.
Cakes, you're you remember Dick Hall's phone number from 60 years ago. You have brought back numbers from A-ball 65 years ago.
Well, but
how do you explain this?
Well, I don't know. I mean, okay, so I'm 80, and the reason I do baseball is because it does make you use your mind, and a couple of years ago, one of the Mariners announcers said, you really kind of know as much about the Mariners as you know about the Orioles. And I said, well, it's kind of my job. He said, no, but you're in the Hall of Fame. You don't need to do that. Well, what does that have to do with broadcasting? I'm in the Hall of Fame for throwing high fastballs and having Brooks Robinson catch them, or Paul Blair in center field, or Singleton or Boog, or Eddie Murray. I mean, some of the greatest players that ever played. So I think, it keeps you going. But now I will remember a moment, and then I have to kind of go back and recollect the name, because I read that your mind, when you get to be my age, you only have so many brain cells. So you have to go back and reinforce kind of what's going on, so I try to do this.
Jim, you're absolutely right. My grandmother moved in with us when I was a teenager. And the difference between her living alone and her seeing family every day and playing Scrabble with us and chatting with us even, it just kept things firing. And she had dementia and Alzheimer's, but I believe firmly we wouldn't know the alter, the latter, excuse me, but definitely prolonged her memory and her life being around people and talking every day and playing word games and doing these kind of things. You're absolutely right. Being in the game to this day keeps you as sharp as ever. Back in your playing days, Jim, my dad told me this. We do a little, phone call before we chat with our guests, that you believe that pitchers are best if they're long, lean, and loose, which is shocking that you would want to join our show again when my dad and I are the exact opposite probably of all three of those. But granted, we're not pitching in the big leagues. We're just interviewing a Hall of Fame pitcher.
Well, that's why they have second base.
All right, Kate,
good point.
Cakes, before you answer that, you mentioned Howard Cosell, and people don't even know who Howard Cosell is after this many years.
Well, no, a lot of people.
Right. What was it like working with Howard Cosell?
Never dull. I mean, I was talking to Al Michaels the other day. I worked with Al. Let's see, I probably started. I did the playoffs. In 1980. Billy Martin and Al and I did. I did the playoffs in '86. So I've known Al forever, and we worked. We worked together. I mean, I got into broadcasting. Reggie Jackson had a agent by the name of Matt Marola, and he calls me and he says, "Listen, there's going to be a one-game playoff between the Red Sox and the Yankees in 1978, and I played from '65 to '84. So, we're not going to be part of that playoff." And he said, "If the Yankees win, Reggie will play, in the playoffs, and if they lose, Reggie will broadcast. So, watch the game." And ABC wants you to do the game. Now, I'd won the Cy Young in 73, 75, 76. Started doing the jockey ads, that I did for 19 years. So apparently ABC said, well, we'll get somebody that's kind of good at baseball, but also people know who they are, blah, 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 blah. Women back then bought 75% of men's underwear. So they were trying to all that stuff. Whatever. So I watched the game, and that's the Bucky Dent game. Mike Torres was pitching for the Red Sox, who had played with us and won 20 games, and then we traded him out to Oakland for Reggie and Kenny Holtzman, along with Don Baylor, who Earl Weaver said when we made the trade will become an MVP, and he did. 3 years later for the Angels in 1979. So I watched the game, and it's 2-0. And we were building a house, and I had told Tommy Chopay, who played the outfield for us, we wanted to move to Florida. I said, "Listen, I'll give you the down payment on the house. Let us stay in your house." So we're in this little house, and no garage or anything like that. It looks like an antique store. We've got furniture in there and all that kind of stuff. And I have my suitcase on the bed, and it's 2-0 Red Sox. It was a beautiful day. I don't eat crabs because I think I'm allergic to them. I had gone crabbing for the only time in my life at about 7 o'clock in Middle River. So I come home and I'm watching the game, and I have my suitcase out, and I go, okay, 2-0 Red Sox. And then Bucky Dent hits a 3-run home run. It gets 3-2, 4-2, 5-2. Red Sox come back, 5-3, 5-4. Goose Gossage comes in, I think gets Fisk, Rice, and Yaz out in the 9th inning. And now I have to jump on a plane and go to Kansas City to work with Howard Cosell. Now, I don't have an ABC jacket. We had those gold jackets. Howard had an extra one, and we both were 43 long. So he gave me one of his jackets, and he had. So this was like on a Monday night. The playoff game was Monday afternoon, and Howard did Sunday night baseball or football. And he flew into Kansas City on a charter, and we have a production meeting. And, Howard's running the meeting. We have, our producer and our director have won Emmys, but Howard, it's Howard's show. So, when we finished, he says, "Hey, young man, you and I and Emmy, that's his wife, let's walk through Alameda Plaza." So we would run into people, and, they know that Howard, because this was 78, Kansas City had lost to the Yankees in 76 and 77. Great series. Now in 78. And they'd go, Mr. Cosell, who's going to win? Kansas City in 4. He didn't mean that because he loved the Yankees, right? So, and then he would look at me and he goes, number 2 sports personality all across this country, the Princeton poll. Ali was first, because Howard did all the stuff with him. So now, we're walking a little bit farther, and he says, young man, are you nervous? And I said, Howard, I'm a little apprehensive. I've never done this before. I was a pitcher. I wasn't a broadcaster. He says, just remember one thing, young man. Everybody that ever worked with me became a star. There you go. And then I see, Keith Jackson's doing the play-by-play, and he goes, well, you'll either know by the 3rd or 4th inning if you have it or you don't. I'm in the 3rd or 4th inning. I have no idea whether I have it or not. So that's kind of how it started. And then if we weren't in the, we were in the we lost the Pirates in 79, so it obviously didn't work. In 80, I did the playoffs with Al and Billy Martin. Billy was, he had scouted me when I was pitching when I was 16. I looked one Saturday morning in Scottsdale, Arizona. I go, and I was a Yankee fan growing up. I mean, I remember the catch he made in the 52 World Series right over the mound, and I go, that's Billy Martin, gray pants on, black, little guy, tan. And so we did the thing, and Billy wouldn't say anything because he didn't want to be controversial. But ABC wanted somebody that is controversial, and Billy wasn't going to play that story. So I worked for Howard for 9 years. We did all kinds of stuff. I mean, probably the best story ever is the Tigers started out 35-5 after we won the World Series in '83 and 1984. The season's over. I had hurt my knee going for a ball, and they didn't have MRIs, so I had a pretty good spring, and I don't get to pitch much. The season's over after 40 games. So the Orioles say, "Hey, you want to go on the IL or do you want to release?" I said, "You know what? I got a job at ABC and all that." So we go up to do the '84 World All-Star game up in San Francisco, and now they have home run derbies and all that stuff. But this is just a workout, and it's windy. I mean, you've been to Candlestick Park, and it's Howard's toupee is kind of blowing in the wind, and it's turning to the side, and he's had a little bit of a tremor. So instead of giving him a lavalier, so he's interviewing people and all that. So we go back to the hotel, and we get out of the car, and Howard, can't believe Candlestick Park. And Al says, "Hey, Howard, it's a monument to chicanery, because of all the political stuff and all that. And then Al turns to me and he goes, I will guarantee you that will be in tomorrow night's broadcast. So I said, okay. Now, I'm only going to be in the back of the booth because it's Al, Earl Weaver, and Howard. So, and then Howard's going to come back and interview me every 2 innings if I have any insight or something. So back then, even though Al Michaels was the play-by-play, in his contract, Howard Cosell got to actually start the thing. Hi, everybody. The 49th All-Star Game coming to you from Candlestick Park, a monument to political chicanery. Al and I are on the floor. Because he got it in the first 20 seconds of the game. And Al kind of planted it the next night. I mean, so there are so many different stories. We were in Cincinnati because Pete Rose was going to break Ty Cobb's record, but it was going to happen later, and they were going to be doing Monday Night Football for ABC. So today, the way I perceive today's broadcast, I'll do 2 minutes with Marge Shot, and blah blah blah. And so Howard had a show called Sports Beat, the lowest rated sports show on Saturday afternoon in the history of ABC Sports. But he had Marge Shot on there, so he wanted to substantiate to the world that this was really, he was a journalist. So Al goes, Howard, why would we want to interview Marge Shot? And he goes, Alfalfa, he used to call Michaels, Alfalfa, what you don't know, within a fortnight, she'll be in a cover of a major publication all across this country. So Al takes a beat and he says, Howard, what major publication might that be? And Al goes, People Magazine, of course. She's going to be on the cover of People Magazine or something. And Al takes a beat and he says, Howard, what you fail to understand, people that read People Magazine don't even know what a fortnight is. So I never realized how easy it was. And then, of course, they're playing the Mets and Lenny Dykstra's first year. And I can't tell you the language. Who the is Lenny Dykstra? So, yeah, this team that's so inept. This Mets team. So I run into David Johnson, who was my former teammate, and he said, "Hey, no, we raised our kids together. Hey, first thing out of his mouth, how's Howard?" I said, "Well, actually, he thought your team was inept." So we have this meeting. I go lift weights, and I'm laying they had a pool, and I'm laying down, reading papers and all that. And here comes Howard. He's got tennis shoes on, gabardine pants, a jacket, gold chain, shirt's unbuttoned, smoking a cigar. And I'm laying down like this, and Howard sits right next to me, and he, young man, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? You can't keep telling him the fastball was up and out over the plate. Now, I was 39 years old, so I said, Howard, how old are you? He said 66. I said, Howard, I'm 39. Don't you think a more important question is, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Now, so these are the kind of dialogues you could have with Howard Cosell. So now we go on the air, and he's going to again lead off the broadcast, and I'm sitting here, and he's going to lean over to me, and kind of want to know where my shoulder is. So I have the microphone, and I'm just he says, "Young man, are you making fun of me? You had to tell your good friend Davy Johnson what I thought of his team. Now it's 5-4. I looked at him. I go, Howard, tell it like it is. I mean, he was just, if he wanted to be here and want everybody else down here, but there was never a dull moment.
Right. So, Cakes, you mentioned
a bottle of vodka, in the playoff in Kansas City when Al Michaels and Howard and I were doing that. He was totally schnockered, but that wasn't the first time we did that. Yeah.
Cakes, you mentioned Earl Weaver. We can't talk to you without talking Earl. Now, I don't know if you've heard this story, Cakes, but Dan Shaughnessy took me to the ballpark. We were both working at the Washington Star. This is late 1979, and I'm going to do a little bit of Oriole stuff. So Dan introduces me to Earl Weaver. Earl meets me for the first time. Dan says, Tim, I mean, Earl, this is Tim Kirkchin. He's going to be covering some games. Sorry, Jeff. Earl Weaver looks at me and goes, "F you, Tim," and walks away. Walks away. It's the first time I'd ever met him in my life. Now, he later taught me more about baseball than anyone I've ever met, and I will always love Earl Weaver. But he F-bombed me in the first 3 seconds that I met him. Was this a surprise to you at all to hear a story like this?
No, when he took the job at, I wasn't there. I was hurt in 1968. He got the job at the All-Star break, and Harry Dalton was the general manager, and he said, "I got to go on the road trip because I don't know if Earl can handle the press." Well, Earl was, he maybe not Buck Showalter. But, I mean, Buck is a brilliant guy and a friend of mine, but he has a monologue. Earl handled the press real well.
Right.
And what I didn't understand, because I got to pitch every fourth day. And I did it for, 12 or 13 years. Just think about that. Earl had, he became the manager in 68. From 68 all the way to 1980, 1-year deals. And then he signed a 3-year deal. So all those years, anytime he put your name in the lineup, whether it was a pitcher every fourth day or playing first, second, or whatever, he trusted you that you were going to play well enough so he could keep his job. So, in spite of the fact we're supposed to have a love-hate relationship, he was a brilliant guy. But what I didn't understand is that as a writer, okay, so he told you to go fuck off. But the bottom line is he realized that I only got to talk to the writers every fourth day. He got to talk to them every day. So I realized I'm never going to win this battle.
Right.
They'd only need me one day. They need Earl every day.
Right.
Because he was great, and he would tell you how he feels, and he'd also tell us how we felt. You sit on the bench and you listen to him, and the first time we traded for Lee May, who was a terrific player, and he mentored Eddie Murray and all that, and after about an inning, Lee looked over at me and he goes, "Is he like this every night?" I go, "Yeah." So just imagine. He's we won 26 out of 31 in 1974. Red Sox blew an eight-game lead. We had a meeting at Labor Day, Paul Blair's house. We said, we're going to bunt, we're going to hit and run, we're going to have our own signs, because Earl's playing for 3-run home runs, and we're not hitting 3-run home runs. We pitched 5 straight shutouts. We won 26 out of 31. I think the Yankees won 25 out of 31, and we won on the last day of the year. Don Hood was pitching for us, and he's backing up, and Memorial Stadium.
Of course.
You come up and there's a long warning track, and so there's runners at like first and second, and Don backs up. He's kind of halfway between home and third, and he's on the warning track. And Don was a good-looking guy, left-handed pitcher from North Carolina, and Weaver's going, "You're choking, you're choking." Now, Don Hood was the most nervous guy that I had ever seen. I didn't know if he was going to be able to get out there because, not that he didn't have talent. He was nervous. So I walked down and I said, "Earl, I know you don't know his personality, but I said, he's uptight enough without you saying you hit a World Series when you were 20 and you pitched a shutout." And I go, "But that's me. That just happened. This is Don Hood, and whatever." So that was Earl. But probably the best story was Mike Flanagan. Late Mike Flanagan used to sit in the row of bulkhead, and we're going up to Boston. And Flanny's like 2-8. He's pitching really well, but we're not scoring any runs. And, run support's pretty important in baseball. And he looks at me and he says, "I don't think Earl has any faith in me." And I said, "Well, he's letting you pitch every fourth day." So we go to Boston, and we're get out in the field, and the manager's office was right across from the bathroom, and there's a urinal there, and I'm going to the bathroom, and here comes Earl. I look at him and I said, "You got to call in Mike Flanagan and talk to him. He doesn't think you have any faith in him." And he goes, "Hey, I put in the line and I don't have any faith." And I said, "Earl, I don't really care." I sit with him. I said, "I know you don't know this because you're up in first class, but we're in coach. We're sitting in the bulkhead, and he doesn't think you have any faith." I said, "Call him in. Lie to him. I don't care what you do. You know what? Because he's got some talent." So Earl doesn't call him in, but he goes to Cliff Keen of the Boston Globe. And Flanny was from Manchester, so he always read the Globe. I mean, that was like a religion up there, right? If you're not reading the Union Leader in Manchester, you're reading the Boston Globe. And he's 2-8, and Earl goes to Cliff Keen and says, "I don't care what Mike Flanagan's record is, he's going to be a winning pitcher in the big leagues." And so 15-10 that year.
So that's how he got his message through to Mike Flanagan. He went to the paper that Mike Flanagan reads. Earl, smarter than the average bear. But by the way, Jeff, this is how Earl was. Cakes is talking about how great he was with the media. We love John Habian. John Habian used to pitch for the Orioles. I'm not picking on John Habian. In a game in Detroit, Cakes was probably there. Game in Detroit, John Habian walked, I want to say, the first 4 batters of the game, and then they had to take him out. And after the game, I just casually asked Earl, granted, it was a loaded question. I said, Habian had a little bit of trouble with his control today, huh, Earl? And he said, yeah, I guess the plate at AAA is 17 feet wide instead of 17 inches wide. Jeff, that's how Earl answered questions. Cake, you heard stuff like that many times, correct?
Well, when the Orioles came up to play us in Aberdeen, when I was 18 and I played for Cal Ripken Sr., big thing. Orioles coming to Aberdeen, South Dakota, and we had a really good team, and so Eddie Watt, 14-1, he starts, does not pitch well. Our center fielder Scruggs hits a 3-run home run off of Steve Barber. Mill Pappas comes in, and I go, best slider I ever saw. So back then, we'd coach first base. We'd alternate coaching first base. So I go out and coach first base, and they bring a kid up, Steve Cosgrove from AA, Elmira. Now we're in A-ball, high A, apparently, and he's got this fastball that takes off and a curveball that drops off the table. And I'm sitting there at first, and I said, this guy's pitching in AA, and you got AAA before you get to the big leagues? So I come in, and I said, hey, if they throw like that in AA, how are we ever going to get to the big leagues? Because this was the most good-looking kid, not really tall, but just great stuff. And they go, well, you don't know the whole story. He played for Earl Weaver in Elmira. So he'd throw ball 1, and Weaver go, here we go again. Ball 2, walk in the effing park. And he totally unnerved him. This guy had some of the greatest stuff in the world, but Earl hated people did not throw the ball over the plate. So on occasion, when I was contributing it to his, displeasure, we would have words and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
We went up to West Palm Beach, spring training, and the wind's blowing in about 30 miles per hour, and I walked a couple of guys in the first inning, and Earl went berserk. And I came in. In fact, Dick Hall was there, and I put my glove down, and I said, hey, you think I'm trying to do that? It's spring training, I'm trying to whatever. And I said, get somebody else. And he said, and I had driven up that day, and he wouldn't let me go home. He took me out of the game. He had a tantrum and all that, but that was Earl. But at the end of the day, if you got to play for Earl, you're playing on a winning team. And we all put up with it. He, like I said, for all those years, gave me the opportunity to pitch and, pitch 290 innings or 305 or 315 or 320. And, he always told us there's nobody better out there in the bullpen, so stop looking. Don Sutton told me that Roy Hartsfield was his first manager in AA, and he handed him the baseball, he hands him the ball, and he goes, don't be looking at the dugout. I'll let you know when you're tired. Don said, I didn't know if I was going to be able to pitch. He poked me in the chest a lot. But he told him exactly what's going to happen. But now, now it's a different game.
But Cakes, as a starting pitcher now, this is the loaded question again. Are you a little bit offended that guys are looking into the dugout after 5 innings, 100 pitches, when Earl and Roy Hartsfield would always say, I'll tell you when you're tired?
Well, of course, not 100 pitches, more like 85. Well, it's funny. I broadcast. I look at their innings. At spring training, we used to pitch on a Wednesday. We'd play an inter-squad game. Thursday, Friday off. Saturday we pitched 3 innings in the inter squad. In the regular spring training schedule. Then you come back 4 days later, pitch 3 or 4 innings. Maybe you go down and throw in the bullpen. Next time it would be 5. Next time it would be 5 and maybe 2 times in the bullpen. Get up 2 things. Then by the end of spring training, then you go pitch a B game up at what was that? Where the Dolphins used to train up in North Miami. We had our minor league system up there. You go up there and pitch. So at the end of spring training, you knew you could pitch 9 innings. Or, my only loss on opening day, I think I'm 5-1, was a 10-inning ball game against Bert Blyleven when the Rangers came to Baltimore that, Larry Harlow in his first game in the big leagues misplayed a fly ball. And I lost 2-1. But I was able to pitch 10 innings because we got paid for wins. We didn't have arbitration. We didn't have somebody telling us how great we are because we happened to, get 16 outs. If you got 16 outs for Earl Weaver, they always talk about, this year let's get 18. Let's try to get 21 outs. 27 outs in a game. If you told Earl Weaver, Earl, I think I can get you 18 outs, he would go, you mean the AAA? Well, it's just a different game. Now, I understand the dynamics. You have analytical guys that say, okay, and I don't know why, but guys are because they're in better shape than we were, and they have their throwing programs. And that's what I've been told. So, you go on StatPass first time through the order, 220. Second time through the order, 260. Third time through the order, 350. So the third time through the order, you don't have to be a math genius to say, hey, guy out in the bullpen, one of my 8 guys sitting out there, numbers are lower than a lot of starting pitchers the third time. Now, you tell me why you can't get a guy out 3 times. Oh, you know why? Because you've shown him everything that you have the first time up or the second time up. So where's the mystery the third time through the lineup? But then again, if you're just throwing for velocity and spin, how about throwing a ball in the outside corner and you kind of know where it's going to go? They're going to hit it to the opposite field. If you have a field like this, left-hand hitter comes up and you can throw the ball on the outside corner, you can take the right fielder. You can size the field that size. Same with the right-hander. So you're pitching to a smaller ballpark. But again, that's kind of what we tried to do.
Right.
Seemed to work, Oh, that's right. I did pitch on a team that had 4 20-game winners. That's right. Which is why Earl had a great sense of humor. Okay, let's see. Which 20-game winner will I start today?
What a tough decision.
I know. Should I go with Claire? They're only going to win 23, 24 games. Or should I get that Pat Dobson guy that we traded from San Diego? So, yeah. A little different.
Well, Cakes, I want to ask about former guests of the show. Obviously, we talked about some other broadcasters you've worked with, but we had Kevin Brown on, and we laughed so hard. We had so much fun with him. He told us a story, and I'll encourage our listeners to go back and listen to the interview of a signed Kevin Brown baseball he received from his brother-in-law, right, Dad?
Yes.
And but it's not the Kevin Brown you were thinking of. It's the Kevin Brown journeyman catcher for the Boston Red Sox. And he's like, I got a great price for it. And well, it's because it wasn't the Kevin Brown that everybody else would think of. We had a great time chatting with him, and he is just the two of you together, the wealth of knowledge, the fun that you have. That booth, it's just a great time.
Well, yeah, then you throw in Ben McDonald, and Ben.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So, yeah, and we're all a lot better if they win. So this 3-6 record they have this year, I hope it changes.
Right.
They're supposed to be better this year. That's what I was told.
Right.
I'll tell you what, I felt like I was going to get some Kool-Aid after reading 6 weeks of they don't let us go to spring training. They do remote games from Baltimore. So I did one of those, and then a regular, when the Nats came to Baltimore right before they opened. So I'm going, it was like everything was Camelot down in Sarasota this year. Now it's a beautiful facility. They have a new, whole section where they have pitching plates and pitchers and all the hitting stuff and all that. But at the end of the day, Tim, you've been around baseball forever. That the teams that make the plays. I mean, I read today they're going to have to be more fundamentally and execute better. No kidding. I mean, that's, good teams don't beat themselves. Good teams know how to play the game, But again, until you're a good team, how are you considered a good team? You win baseball games. You win the one-run games. So, that's what they did back in 23 and, even 24.
Right.
Before.
Well, Cakes, we've asked you to do this before, but we're going to ask you again. You threw almost 4,000 innings in the major leagues and never gave up a grand slam. I think Nolan Ryan, who I love, by the way, and by the way, I had lunch with Nolan Ryan the other day. It was fascinating. But he gave up 12 grand slams. You gave up 0. How do you explain that you pitched almost 4,000 innings and never gave up a grand slam?
Well, you noticed that there were 3 guys out on the bases. You came down at Camden Yards and handed me the paper. You said the boys in Bristol said you won't know what this is. Yeah. And then you handed me, I don't know, 12 or 13
11 names.
Whatever. And I go, well, the only logical, answer is the fact this must have been the guys that I walked with the bases loaded. So I walked. And then I think Seaver walked more, and Tom Terrific was terrific. So, you decide who you want to pitch to, even if the bases are loaded.
Cakes, just tell us how close you came that day in Cleveland to giving up a grand slam to Rico Cardi.
It wasn't that close. Now, my good friend Dennis Eckersley thinks it was.
Right.
Okay, so this is 77, I believe. I think it's 77 or 78, but I get tennis elbow. Nobody gets tennis. You get it here. You get your medial epicondyle where all your flexors come. So all of a sudden I have tennis elbow. So now all of a sudden when that little last thing gives you, you throw a slider, you turn your wrist, well, it's killing me. So I try every kind of modality, and I go from 12-8 to 13-12, and I have to win my last 7 starts. So I win 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I'm going for number 19 against Dennis actually on a Saturday afternoon, and Eck is dealing. He's striking guys out and pointing at them and all that. And, so we get into the 8th inning, and Paul Day hits a little looper. They get a bunt. DeCinces falls down at third because the football field was horrible. And I fall down. Now the bases are loaded. I get Bruce Bochy coming up, Andy Thornton and Rico Cardi. And I only have one more start after this. So I go, how am I going to get out of this? And I go, 2-2 on Bochy, and he strikes out on a high fastball. I go, okay. Now, Andy Thornton was their all-star RBI guy, made the all-star team. Throw him a fastball up and in, he pops up to Mark Belanger. I said, whoa, wait a minute. Now, we got Rico Cardi. Now, Rico Cardi, he used to talk to you, big smile on his face. Well, why did he smile? He hit 366 and led the National League in hitting. He was a happy guy, right? So I had thrown him a slider down and away earlier in the year, and he hit it over the right center field fence about 430. But it was a solo home run. And we used to always talk about the fact there are pitches, not only in a game, but in a year, that are information pitches. So I got the information that this is Rico Cardi. And I had faced him when I was 19. He was playing for the Braves. Now, so he hits his slider, a pitcher's pitch over the right center field fence. I know I'm probably not going to throw him a slider with the bases loaded because I'm heavily invested in not throwing one, right? Probably only about 2,800 innings at that point. So anyway, I throw him a high fastball. And he always swings at it. He takes it. Ball 1. Throw him another high fastball. He takes it again. And I go. So I take a deep breath and I said, Rick Dempsey catch. And I said, like we did, just put the glove in the outside corner. So I throw him a fastball, load away, hits it off the end of the bat. But in those days, depending on what kind of offensive club, because the outfield was in a football arena, they could bring the fences in or out or whatever. The fences are medium that year, and the wind's blowing out. But it's a routine fly ball, except that Rico Cardi hit it, so it's not a routine fly ball. It's kind of like saying, when Eddie Murray hit one, or or Booth or somebody like that, Booth Powell. So the ball goes out there, and Al Bunbury, what's Al, 5'7", 5'8"? He just goes back and he reaches up and catches it. He doesn't jump over the fence. Doesn't do what Joe Adele did 3 balls over the wall like the other night or whatever. He just catches the ball. Now I'm on the foul line because it was kind of routine until it wasn't. And then,
Right.
because the fences are in, the wind's blowing, and, Al catches it, and then Eddie Murray and Kenny Singleton back-to-back home runs, and I win 4-1. And the next day we're out running, and, Eck and I are good friends, and, another first ballot Hall of Famer. And I had met him in Erie, Pennsylvania when when he was like 21 or 22, and he spoke another language, cheese and iron and all this stuff like that. But he was, he's a really great guy, Now, but when he's pitching, so I looked at him and I said, you outpitched me yesterday till the 9th inning. But I said, punch. I mean, he struck out 10 or 11, and I probably struck out 4. But he's pointing at him and all that. I said, you don't need to do that. You're as talented as anybody. I said, just come out. That's your job. Get the ball, turn around, get the next guy. And he goes, and now he'll tell the story now. He goes, well, I should have won that game. I said, well, you should have, except that you gave up 4 runs and I gave up 1. That's kind of baseball. So, and then I won. Then I pitched 11 innings, and Dempsey hit a little looper down the right field line to win my 20th against the Tigers. So that's what kind of we did. But so that's the closest I ever threw to throwing a grand slam. Even though I did throw a grand slam to Johnny Bench in Niagara Falls in 1967 when they had the racial riots and couldn't play in Buffalo where they filmed The Natural. So we had to go out there. I mean, I warmed up on a berm in right field. They had yard markers, and Weaver told me I had a 5-0 lead. I struck out Bench the first time. Again, I mean, my arm was killing me. And next time he runs out, I bases loaded with a 5-0 lead. He goes, just throw the ball down the fucking. And Johnny hit it about 450 feet. It was the last time they saw it. It was going into the mist of Niagara Falls. And then I threw one in spring training to Freddie Patek.
Wow.
In Fort Myers.
Wow. Jeff, Freddie.
I struck out Aurelio Rodriguez. If they had the ABS, I would have challenged it right down the middle, and how far I missed it. Freddie hit a fly ball to left field, and it was one of the 10 runs and 14 hits I gave that day.
Wow. Jeff, Freddie Patek was shorter than me. He was 5'4", and he played a pretty darn good shortstop on the major league level for a long time.
We have time. I'll leave you with one story. So you talked about Cosell. So we go to Kansas City to do the playoffs, and we're going out to the ballpark, and Howard goes, I'm in the quandary. Who am I going to interview today? And I said, well, Brett's going to give you the standard stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, George Brett, Hall of Famer, great player. I said, but Freddie Patek, he's going to tell you exactly, he's going to tell it like it is. So Howard gets him on there, and, Freddie says, because they had lost 2 playoffs the year before, and he says, the only people that think we're going to win are the players and the coaching staff. He said, they drew 2.2 million people. He said, our fans should act like Yankee fans, get off their hands, and maybe we'll win. So the opening of our ABC telecast was, like in the old days, war over, or, World War II over, or whatever. They didn't have the papers being printed. Drats foiled again by those damn Yankees. That's the headline that we had in our opening. So 7th inning, Freddie comes up, Kansas City's down, hits a 3-run home run, and as he's coming around second base, Howard Cosell says, just like in the Broadway play, damn Yankees, you got to have heart. Now, who thinks of that? It was brilliant. Drats foiled again by those damn Yankees. It was one of the theme songs of Damn Yankees.
Oh, God.
Now, that was Howard. Now, he was annoying, I mean, ripped everybody in his book and all that. But, so I mean, when I did the playoffs in 78, we come back and we're in Yankee Stadium, and, I'm new. I mean, I'm a pitcher. It doesn't matter how I broadcast because I'm going to go back and pitch the next year. So I'm up there, and they want Chuck Howard won about 4 Emmys. He's our producer. He says, Howard, can you voice over the 76 and 77 playoffs? And there was a play, I think Mark Lydell gives up a home run or a double to Chris Chambliss or something like that. And so anyway, so I'm sitting there, and they just they run the film, and Howard voices over. No script, no nothing. And so I have my headset on because I'm trying to listen and learn. And Chuck says, "Hey, Howard, why don't I play it back?" He goes, "Why? It was perfect." So anyway, he said, "No, I just feel more comfortable and all that." So anyway, he plays it back, and the intonation, the timing, it's incredibly perfect. So Chuck says, "Well, Howard, what do you think?" He says, "I told you it was perfect." And it was. So that's Howard. Wow. And then the guy would come in to do his radio show, Howard Cosell speaking of sports. And no script or anything, like he'd do 3, 2, 1, he'd do a minute and a half. 3, 2, 1, do the last minute, and then the guy would walk out of the booth.
Amazing. Cakes, we kept you for over an hour this time. We could have taken 10 hours.
Could do another hour.
Jeff, you didn't even ask a question the last 30 minutes because Cakes was filling it up. I'm sorry.
I was just absorbing it like a sponge. I mean, to talk to a Hall of Famer, and you ask one question, and your recall, Cakes, is just unbelievable. And we don't even need to fact check it because we know if Jim Palmer said it, then it happened.
No, that's in fact, somebody sent me some on my X about the first game I ever pitched in, but I only threw one pitch. Yeah, I mean, I came in. Robert. We get 4 runs off Malbuquette, just 1965, and then Robin goes out there and he struggles. So I come in and, in fact, I walk Yaz to load the bases up, and then I got to face Tony Conigliaro, the best young fastball hitter, and he swung at 2 high fastballs, and then somehow I threw a low and away fastball, and John Flaherty, the home plate umpire, called it a strike, and I could have got the grand slam out of the way because the second guy that I ever. It was Fenway Park too. Right. No flurries.
Wow.
So yeah, somebody sent me the kind of a game. Bleffery hit a home run. Yaz hit a home run. But that's a few years ago.
Right. That was 60 years ago. Cakes, thanks so much for joining us. We will see you. I'll see you at Camden Yards the next time you're there. And
I got the Reds. Yeah, I got the Red Sox in Houston coming up. So at the end of the month.
All right, good. Well, I'll be there. I'll see you then. Thanks for joining us again. It was enlightening beyond words. Thank you so much.
Enlightening. We don't. I'm out here in California. We don't have a lot of lightning.